Welcome to this webinar. And I just want to start with one slide, right? And saying that my heart is bleeding by looking at this data, right? I mean, there is continuous reports, like the latest report from Gallup, for example, that keep reporting the same kind of data, that most of the employees are not engaged, right? And 67% in this latest report are not engaged. And this is something also strange if you think about, countries like, Finland or Sweden or Denmark. You might think about, these are the happiest countries in the world. So let's say the data, maybe they are different, but still the same, right? It doesn't matter how happy the country is considered. The amount of disengaged employees is still more or less the same. And that would cause turnover. And if you think about, majority of people are leaving companies, and they're not leaving a job, they're leaving a manager, right? They leave for lack of appreciation or because of their manager. And this turnover is not just about, situation is not nice, but it's also not economic or sustainable, because it seems that turnover just in the United States costs almost $300 billion per year, while disengagement drains trillions of dollars in terms also on from a stress and burnout and health perspective, right? So these are like disasters, right, if you think about. And still, what I see going around in companies, that how they want to increase the engagement of people. Well, okay, let's put some foosball table around, right? Or maybe, we organize, we give some nice swags to newcomers, to new employees, or maybe we organize some nice Christmas party once a year, right? I mean, I'm not saying these are bad things, but regardless of this, the data are still the same. So there's something going on, something that is not working. So there is something else that needs to be done. So, as you probably say, my name is Giuseppe De Simone. I'm a trainer and a coach. I've been working for 15 years as a coach and trainer. I consider myself an engineer turned leader turned coach. My mission is to help individual teams and organizations to create, more human and more productive workplaces. That's why, this subject today it's very much at my heart. And I'm part of Better Change, as you know, is a collective of coaches in 11 countries, and we do lots of things. I'm not spending time on this, but you can have it as a reference in your material. So, in the abstract, I was saying like, okay, we will learn and explore how we can, following Agile principles and values, how we can make better and more engaging workplaces, right? And the question I always got from people is that, but what is Agile, right? I mean, even though everyone say Agile is dead, Agile is alive, whatever is hype on the web, still I get this question, what is Agile? And the first answer for me, is always the same. First of all, Agile is an adjective, it's not a noun, right? It's not something you do, you implement, you scale. It's a property of an individual or team or an organization. So it's about being adaptable and adjust to changing circumstances, right? So this is the short question. But let's look at the long questions, at the long answer, sorry. Well, what Agile is, it depends on the perspective, right? It depends on which level we are talking about. And, for example, we can think about, as many people say, that Agile is a mindset, is a way of thinking, right? And when I say mindset, you can call it culture. It's a set of values and principles, right? And this set of values and principles originate from certain contexts. Like, for example, it originates to the context of manufacturing, from Toyota, from Lean, and also partly from software development. Still, those values and principles can be applicable in any different context. They're quite agnostic about the domain, right? But Agile is also about a set of control frameworks. So it's about a set of ways of controlling your work. And when we talk about control framework, we talk about, defined roles or artifacts and event. And here on the left, you see a list of possible frameworks we talk about, right? And also, those on this level, this is quite agnostic when it comes to the domain. For example, Scrum can be applicable basically to anything as long as you can plan your work a little bit, at least 24 hours in advance, and you can inspect that your product, right? I've implemented Scrum in many different contexts, right? In manufacturing, in sales and marketing, even in an elementary school. But also we can think about Agile as a set of tools and practices. And of course, here is where the domain matters, right? Of course, the practice that you're going to use, whether you are developing software or you are a marketing team, it's going to be very, very different, right? So it depends on which level you're talking about. In this talk, we want to focus on the upper part, right? And see, in a way, how we can create, again, like how can create engaging workplaces and more human workplaces by getting inspired by these values and principles. But I mean, if we talk about HR, you have seen probably different kind of trends going on social media. Like there are people like talking about Agile in HR, right? Agile or Agile HR. What do they normally mean is about like, okay, we have a team of HR professionals. Let's arrange those teams as Agile teams, as Scrum teams, and see what happens, right? And I've seen this happening, and I've seen that, this can be productive, it can improve the way HR teams work, but still in the end, you don't get a big benefit from an holistic point of view besides having a few people having fun or enjoying working together. What I would like more to stress is about, maybe there is more into HR in Agile, meaning that how an HR function, how HR professional can support an organization that wants to become more flexible, more resilient. And there's a lot into this that is much more about setting up some random Scrum team in an Agile function, in an HR function. So what does it mean? I mean, let's see what the latest State of Agile report says. I mean, this is, you see, like the list of the biggest obstacle to an Agile organization, right? To an organization that is really flexible and resilient. And you see what's on top. On top, you see resistant to change or culture clash. And then on the second point, you talk about leadership participation. That should be already enough to understand how HR plays an important role, because when you talk about culture, when you talk about leadership, right, this is HR battlefield, this is HR playground, right? I mean, at least in my experience, like, a lot of this stuff comes from HR, or at least see HR involved. So if that's the biggest obstacle to having a more flexible and adaptable organization in this century, that's probably a lot to do from HR. And on the other side, like, as Edgar Schein used to be, in the end, they are the same thing, because leadership and culture are two sides of the same coin. But I mean, if we focus on culture, like, what is culture, right? What is culture? And he always said, like, it is basically the way we do things around here, right? The way we think, the way we speak, the way things get done around here. So basically, it's a collection of how people behave in a certain company. It's not definitely what is formally written on the values on, that are listed on the website or on the flipchart on the wall, but it's actually what you see going on around in the company. And then we see there is also more that HR can do in this area, right? Because I don't know how many of you know Kurt Lewin. He was a German psychologist, he died in 1940 and was born in the last part of the 19th century. And he put up this, that it's called now Levin's equation. Basically, he used to say that behavior B of a person or a group of people is the function of the person itself and the environment E. So the environment around the people. And with environment, we mean anything. We mean, the physical environment, the tools we use, the process we use, the people around us, and so on and so forth, right? And he didn't explain how this function is done, but he just said there is this function. But maybe we can get a glimpse about how this function works. If we look at the work of this other person on the right, Dr. William Edward Deming. He was an American statistician who was sent by the American government to Japan at the end of the Second World War to help the Japanese industry to recover after the war, right? Probably all of us know that lean thinking comes from Toyota, but very few people know that the lean thinking has been shaped a lot by the thinking of Dr. Deming. For example, he was the first one talking about respect for people, which in the end which ended up being one of the pillars in the Toyota house, for example. And he used to say that 94% of problems in business are systems driven, and only 6% are people driven, which means that if you think about, if all of us did their best at work, 94% of the problems will still be there. Which also tells us that probably the environment E in the Levin's equation is what is most important, right? Because environment and system, it's the same thing, right? It's where we live and where we work. So there's very little we can do on the variable P, right? So because, maybe I'm telling you a secret that you didn't know before, but we cannot, or you cannot change people. We can barely change the person we see in the mirror every morning. However, we can influence the behavior of the people and therefore the culture, the actual culture of your company by influencing the environment where people live. And also consider that you or each of us are the environment where are part of the environment where our colleague lives. So there's a lot we can do that HR professional can do in changing the company culture and therefore, nudging it towards more flexible and resilient organization by changing the way they operate. So I think this is a turning point, right? So let's see what does it concretely mean for HR. So what are the implications of what was born as manifesto for agile software development, but in the end we said this is a mindset. So it's really like, even it started from software, it can be applicable to everything, right? So I try to translate what it can mean for HR professionals, and also try to give some concrete example about how these things can be translated to practice. So let's start from the values, right? So the first value is individuals and interactions over process and tools, right? We say we value things on the left more than things on the right. So what can it mean for HR? It means, for example, putting people first, right? For example, prioritize conversation and connection with people over just rigid policies that are valid for everyone. Rethink performance review from the perspective of the people, not from the perspective of, just putting some X on some task list. When it comes to onboarding, focus on cultural integration, on mentorship, on experience, again, not just checklists. I will tell you some stories at the end, for example, about how some of these things have been rethought in practice, right? Second value say basically working software over comprehensive documentation. Of course, this was more far away from HR context, so I translated it in something that could make sense. Impactful people practice over heavy paperwork, right? I mean, life is already very hard for us and for our colleagues. why you should make it more complicated. So try to make HR practices more lightweight. Replace lengthy job description with clear role outcomes. And maybe again, like rethink performance management by emphasizing on outcomes and growth instead of forms. And I have specifically a story about this later on. Third value says, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Again, this was a little bit far away, so I retranslated. So this is about like co-create things, collaborate with your customer. Who are your customer? Your customer are your employees, they are the stakeholders. Involve them in shaping policies, in learning and culture, and move away from one-size-fits-all policies. And then the fourth value, responding to change or following a plan. So for example, like try to adapt practice quickly, not having lengthy processes, and introduce a mechanism so that you can check and continuously align with people need and with the company strategy. I know this seems still on a high level, but I hope that is already triggering some thinking in you. But as I said, I will tell a couple of stories. But let's move to the principles, because the principles already are trying to make it a little bit more concrete. So what I did, I grouped the 12 principles in 4 groups, because the Asian principles have quite a lot of things in common. So the 3 principles I summarize as deliver value continuously, right? I mean, they talk about working software and so on, but in the end, it means deliver value continuously. So what can it mean? Well, we said already before, try to create value for employees and leaders early and often, which can mean like try to make some experiment, try to pilot HR programs by involving, encouraging, inviting people to comment and to give feedback and to adjust and deliver frequent improvements. Right? As simple as it looks like. The second group of 3 principles can be summarized as collaborate and empower. So what can it mean? It can mean like you can partner closely with managers and employees, build motivated individuals, and prioritize, again, real conversation over documents. Third group of principles is about sustain and simplify. Measure your impact by the outcome you produce. Try to encourage well-being and sustainable performance, and again, try to simplify more than complicate. And last but not least, enable growth and self-organization. I really believe that it's the people that make or break the deal. It's not what processes we use, right? Because processes is like the map, right? But it's when we go on the terrain that things change, and usually it's not, things don't go well not because our process don't work, but because we don't have enough competent people, enough skilled people. So invest in people capability, and then trust them to shape their way of working instead of trying to standardize way of working for everyone. And again, build reflection loops for continuous improvement. I will leave time for question at the end, but if you have questions, just feel free to raise your hand. So let's talk about stories, right? So the first story is about Ericsson. I've been working at Ericsson for many years, and we changed or we dared to change the performance management system, at least for an organization of 2,000 people. So this is not for the whole Ericsson, which has, I don't know, 120,000 employees now, but for a business unit of 2,000 people. So because what we did is that we had started Scrum teams, but still we realized that things didn't work because everyone was having their own personal performance goals, and people were not really motivated to help each other. Maybe it was working pretty well inside one team, but they were not really willing to work with each other across teams. And we had like 100 teams working together to develop the same telecom network, right? So we said, okay, how we can make the good things easy and the bad things hard, right? And we reflected that maybe we need to change the environment. We cannot change people just to invite them to collaborate more, because it simply doesn't work. So what can we change the environment? How we can nudge people in to collaborate more? So we tried to convince HR on this big business unit to try a new performance management. And it didn't go well at the beginning, but then we tried what ends up to being a good strategy when you have to inject change, right? So do some experiment. I mean, a pilot project is something nobody will say no to. Right? So that's what we say. Okay, then we want to volunteer to try it in our small organization of 100 people and see how it works. Then we will share the feedback with everyone, and then let's see what happens. So what we did, we changed the performance management in a way that each person would have 3 different types of goal, and each type of goal would have the same weight in determining the employee bonus, right? So 33% of the goal were the same for the whole organization, were set by the organization, and were something like fostering collaboration, right? So if everyone is successful, if the company is successful, the organization is successful, everyone will benefit. Everyone will be successful, right? Then 33% of the weight of the goal were team-based goals. So there were goals that were the same for every person inside the team, and it was decided by the team, defined by the team. And then 33% was individual goals, but the individual goals were just learning and growth goals. They were not performance goals. So it was only goals about, okay, what I need to learn to become, more effective in the team, but also how much time did I need to spend teaching others with what I know, because we want to have more multi-skilled individuals and multidisciplinary teams. And actually we saw that by doing that, we immediately saw a shift in the way the teams collaborated, right? And therefore we presented the result, and then it was adopted by the bigger organization. So we were still having one-to-one, interview with manager and seeing the individual, but the way those interviews were shaped were completely different, right? So this is one story, right? Things can be done if we think about, okay, how we can, encourage the behavior we want to see, and instead discourage the behaviors we don't want to see. The second example is from Swedbank, it's the biggest private bank in Sweden. I worked as a consultant there, and actually they wanted to redesign the leadership development program for all leaders in the company. And of course, the way they were starting doing it was to, again, starting some upfront planning and then try to come up with some ingredients. But then I was working with a team of coaches, and we started to discuss with HR about, okay, but why don't we do this in a different way? I mean, we have some assumptions, some hypotheses about how we want to do that. And then let's involve a number of leaders that would be willing to contribute and co-create the program. So we started a recruitment campaign with volunteers and different levels of the organization. So we were looking for 16 people that would participate to the first pilot. And, everybody was skeptical about how the people have so much to do. But I tell you, like, when we launched it and we launched it properly, we got, I think, at least 67, 68 applications. So we had to say no to a lot of people, but we said people, okay, first come, first served, right? And then we had this program, and we had, of course, some ideas. We put up this program, we ran it with these 16 people, and then at the end of each session, we reviewed with them, and then we collected new needs, and then it was shaped through different iterations. So again, deliver value early and often. Don't wait until things are perfect, and again, engage customers. In this case, were the employees, right? The last story It's from a company I cannot reveal the name. So it was about like team-based hiring and salary review, right? So we have been trying, working in a more agile way for a while, and then we said, okay, how we can increase the autonomy of these teams. So what happened is that teams were given the authority to hire new team members, right? So they were describing the position they want to have, and then what we did was like not having a lengthy like hiring process, but more about screening some let the team screen some CVs, and then we were allowing the person to work with the team for one sprint, right? And then at the end of this sprint, the people were saying yes or no, because it's so hard to just judge from interviews, right? Unless you really work in a team, and people can look at not only the skills, but also how do they fit in that specific context, because it doesn't matter whether you are an excellent programmer, for example, like you don't necessarily fit in any kind of team, like a master football player doesn't necessarily fit in any team. And then after a while, also this group of people were kind of collectively deciding, and we have tried this in other companies as well, collectively deciding their salary. And the way we were doing is that we were giving to people certain kind of let's call them coin, like credits. So each person in the team got like 10 credits, so to speak. And then what they had to do, they had to give those credits away to someone else in their team. So for example, I could decide to give 3 credits to Nino because he helped me so much during this year, and maybe 1 to Gregor because he did a good job, but we didn't work to each other, maybe 0 to Ben, and so on. And then at the end, once it was decided that the budget going for the team bonus was, I don't know, 3%, 2%, or whatever. And then in the end, each one in the team got a share of that 2-3%, depending on how many coins, how many credits they had at the end. So it was team decided, right? So anyone, if I had like 20 credits, I would get twice as much as my colleague who had 10 credits. And it was not my manager to decide, but it was the group to decide based on how the team worked. And then I can go with other example, like, at Ericsson also we had a self-organized way of distributing teams, but maybe that's not so much to do with HR in this context. I hope I gave you some kind of concrete example about how those values and principles can create, because it doesn't have to be big thing, right? And it doesn't have to be from day one for everyone, but it can start small and evolve from there. But the question is how we do that, right? And to me, the first step, it seems not so obvious, but for me, the first step is about shifting the metaphor about how we see our organization, right? Because, we have seen for so long our organization as machines, right? As machines where we could put some input and then we get some output, and then employees in the company are just like cogs in that machine. And if you think about some of the terminology we use in our companies, this terminology revealed that in the end we consider companies like machine. If you think about, we say things like driving a change or driving a strategy or, steering committee, right? All these languages and adjectives remind like machine. But if we probably shift to think about our organization as organism of people, of human beings, we cannot change as human beings, but we can change the ecosystem with putting in what makes sense to people. And then we'll probably, see some changes, and then this open up, like all different perspectives, right? Because if we think about organization or machine, we believe that if we can, like if they work like a machine, that if they break, we can take them to a workshop, or if we want to change the way they function, we have to change the program. But this doesn't work with teams organization. Otherwise, tell me which workshop I can bring a team I have a lot of problems with, right? And of course, this works also for HR, because we talk also about human resources, right? And I just want to show it. This is the sticker I have on my laptop, and says like, if you mean people, say people, not resources. So maybe if we start changing the very language we call this kind of function, this would be a good starting point. So, and with this, I just thank you, and I'm happy if you connect with me. And now I'm ready for question. Yes and no. I mean, you still had formal individual goals, because the tool that we had, that Ericsson had, was not designed for having team goals. But I mean, it means that, we have this organization, 100 people. So 33%, 1/3 of any individual of these 100 people was the same goal. They had the same goal for 1/3, right? And this was decided by the organization. So 1/3 of the weight, either everyone succeeds or no one succeeds, right? So that's one thing. And then the second third, it was every person in the team had the same goal. And again, those second third of the weight, either everyone in the team succeeded or no one in the team succeeded. And then you had the last third, there was your own special personal goal, but they were not performance goals. I think this was also the tweak, right? The only individual goal were personal learning and growth goals, right? So there was nothing that it was really individual connected to performance. So that was like the trick. But I mean, formally, there were still individual goals because the tool was not prepared for this. But actually, it was mathematically that, if you want to get 100% of your end of year bonus, you have to contribute to the organization, you have to contribute to your team in a good way, and you have to learn and teach new things. Because also one problem that I had is that we had like the most senior people that didn't have time. I mean, they also didn't have the skill, but didn't have time to teach their knowledge to others, right? Because they were still measured in how much they contributed. And we say, no, I mean, those senior people, we need them for something more important, right? So we started to say, for example, that if you are senior on a certain level, you should free up at least, I don't remember now what it was, one day a sprint or something, just to teach others, right? And you were rewarded for this because you had it your goal. So it was not something that you did just to make a favor to others. So again, like it's always about, again, making the good things easy and the bad things hard. Yeah, but still we went around the constraint, right? So, I mean, of course, like changing the tool would have been such a big thing, like that we couldn't probably do it in 20 years, right? But maybe starting a small pilot and try to get around the tool, there was like a much more successful strategy, right? And what I normally say that it's not normally this kind of bureaucracy, well, especially when you make a change, is sort of like, you have to deal like it's the tax agency, right? I mean, no one wants to pay taxes, so, but we need to, but it's better to do it in a very efficient way. So, no, these are like this is from this report. You find the link here. So these are like this is basically been like a research through I don't know how many hundreds of interviews. To if you click the link later on when you get the material, we see all the statistic about how many individuals were interviewed from how many companies, I think still 75% of the company are from US, but it doesn't change so much. And this was what was reported as being the biggest obstacle, the biggest resistance in organization want to become more flexible. So it's not just HR, it's what happens in the organization. So my point was that since, the top two obstacles are culture and leadership, which by the way is the same thing, I said, hey, this is something that, can't be, let's say, can't be not taken into consideration by HR. And this is something that can't be fixed without involving HR, because this is, of course, coming from leadership. But normally HR departments are the departments that operationally work on this stuff. And that's why I say they play an important role. And the way they can affect this is, of course, by doing it more properly, but also by changing the way they work. Because I believe that, since our organization are complex system, like probably if you change the way you yourself work, that could be like, a big effect, right? I mean, much bigger than if you start a huge program that normally doesn't end up in anything, right? I mean, although 70% of all change programs fail, but I mean, if we start from us, maybe we can change something.
Yeah, but
Yeah, and I would say that yes and no. And in the sense that culture and leadership are two sides of the same coin. So from this perspective, you are right. But at the same time, I think the leadership is not only coming from top management, right? I mean, in the current world, like we should think about leadership as a competence that needs to be spread throughout the organization. So leadership act can come from anywhere. I still remember Gary Hamel once, in one of his biggest talks, saying that, if we wait for any change to come from the CEO of the company, it's probably never going to happen, right? I mean, while that's true, I mean, at the same time, we have no other chance to lead from wherever we are in the organization. There's no alternative to that. I mean, the alternative is not doing anything. So my message to all of us, but also especially to HR professional, is you have a big part. Maybe these people or none of us has the biggest decision power, but also at the same time, complex systems like our organization are not changed with an upfront program. I mean, we're not going to complexity science too much, but I mean, like since don't know. I mean, if you think about changing our culture, we don't know exactly what to do, and we don't know exactly how to do it, and there are people involved. So how we can set up a program, like many times it happens, right? Even if it's the CEO to start up this program, how even the CEO can start up a program on something that no one knows what to do and how to do it, right? So at the same time, so it's probably a lot of micro initiatives coming from a lot of parts in the organization. Of course, they should be coherent and aligned towards a strategy. So probably from top down, what must come top down is what kind of culture do we want, or what kind of culture is going to be more coherent for the business environment we are into. So definitely the sense of direction must come top down, but then probably you're going to reach much more with micro action coming from a lot of parts of the organization, more than an upfront grandiose program coming from the top. That at least my personal experience. And Ben, I'm sure he knows much more about complexity science than me, and can probably add a few things. And as you said, like if everyone believes that, I mean, and we have to accept that everyone is a leader, because that's the reality, right? Because even if I'm a developer, I would probably be a leader in certain circumstances, like leading a technical discussion, right? And in some other context, I would be a follower, even though I'm a senior manager, because I would be a follower in other situations. So if we think about this, that depending on the context, everyone can be a leader and a follower, then what you say is so important, that really the culture can be changed with leadership, because leadership behavior is the only thing that we can really control, but that's also our behavior, right? So if the individual behavior change, then the culture change, right? So that's, and I agree with you, with AI, this becomes much more important on several levels. For example, one level is also about, okay, AI, what does it mean for our culture and for our leadership, right? Is it just like giving everyone in the company a ChatGPT license, or is it about rethinking the way we collaborate with our customer, we work and make it much faster, much more, I don't know, and what culture does this require? Yeah, I recently have, like just 2 weeks ago, a talk at a conference that was exactly about this, about how we can future-proof our skill for 2030, right? And from all the data we see, and also this is my take on this, is that if we really want to become or want to improve in the age of AI, the only way to do it is not to compete with machines, because if we want to compete with machines, we're going to lose, right? I mean, the only way it's become more human, right? Which means we have to grow our set of human skill. And if you think about the most in-demand skills in the 2030, there's a lot about all the things we're talking about now, right? It's a lot about, leadership, is a lot about, be able to learn how to fail fast. It's also a lot about, serendipity, about learning how to, what I call like intelligent luck, right? I mean, be prepared so that, whatever comes to you, you get the best out of it, right? And I totally agree. It's, people first is the recipe if you want to become even more productive in the future, right?
I have a question, Giuseppe. So you talked about leadership and culture, two sides of same coin. I buy totally into that. In the 3 cases you shared here, was there anything particular that was done to kind of encourage leaders or convince leaders that it was a good idea? And when I say leaders here, I actually mean managers.
Yes, of course. I mean, none of these things could be done if we didn't have some like management support, right? I mean, and it was like, how change manager works and what are the tricks, right? So there are 2 or 3 ingredients that you have to always use. Like, I mean, and definitely the first trick was to involve like innovators and early adopters of this, right? So for example, like, of course, if you think about the first example at Ericsson, of course, but if you think about the all HR departments, I mean, there were very hardcore people that would have been like very hard to get support from. But we were sure to get in that department 1 or 2 people that were, just like the idea just because it was new, right? And then we got support from them and from the head of the business unit to start the pilot. And then, of course, we had and then this was the fact that this became the official pilot for the whole organization, helped getting the support from the local management in Italy. Say, hey, now, wow, we are an organization, we are role modeling for everyone. So this kind of sign of pride, and then let's do this, right? So, and then this was like support, but also we're putting them in the front, right? And then all the manager had to align to this new way of doing it, right? Because it was about setting goals and so on. So definitely, right? I mean, since leadership is the only way we can actually affect the organization, in this specific case, we had to nudge also managers to role model this to a certain extent. and I could make examples, similar example on the other stories as well. But I mean, the pattern are very similar. I mean, we've been working also together. So the secret sauce for instilling change are pretty similar in all situations, right?
Yeah. My experience is that managers, they like, and I can say this because I've been a manager myself. Managers, they like change until they realize it's also something about them changing their behavior. Any point you want to make on that?
Yeah. I've been a manager as well, I know. But I say it was like a way to nudge them, right? It's really like the curve of innovation adoption, right? I mean, if you have enough support after a while, you have to adjust, right? Because you will be in or will be out, right? And so we use different leverage at that time, and yeah. So I'm happy to answer more questions, but yeah, you will get the material. You have my LinkedIn profile. I'm happy to connect, or my email. So if you have more questions, feel free to get in touch. And yeah, and I'm really thankful for you making the time in your busy calendar to stay with us today. And it was nice. It was a cozy environment where we could make it personal. So again, thank you very much. And let's hope we meet in an upcoming webinar from Better Change. So stay tuned with the next appointments.